Hi, I'm Liv and welcome back to the Book Nook. I can't tell how loud I'm talking. I've got either the same cold that's come back with a vengeance or a new cold. And I hate it. Everything's horrible. My nose just made a squeak. I don't know whether you could hear that, but my nose just squeaked. I've got honey and lemon, which is a bit stronger on the lemon than I thought. Right, so this video is going to be a wrap-up because it turns out I've read enough to do a wrap-up now, I think, as we're halfway through the month. So my last wrap-up was a little while ago, and it was a bit more of a kind of wrap-up and currently reading video, if I remember rightly, so this one may recap two at the tail end of that, and that is... Now, the first one that I finished this month was actually one that I finished just at the end of August. That was last month, wasn't it? Yeah, just at the end of August for the first Pullman book group that we did at work. So naturally, I finished reading Northern Lights. And I spoke about this in my currently reading and about how many memories I had sort of wrapped up with physically reading it in the first sort of few chapters. And then I very quickly progressed past the point where I could remember what the bloody hell was going on. So it was like reading a new book, and it was absolutely fantastic. I'm not like a mega fan. You know, I know there are some real mega fans out there, and this is only the second time that I've read these books in my life, so I'm not, you know, not going to pretend I know more than I do, because I don't. But I thoroughly enjoyed reading it, because, as I say, I very quickly got past the point where I could remember any of what happened, so it was like reading a new book, a totally new book to me, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I love Lyra as a character. I think she's, you know, a real gutsy, kind of mischievous little impsy. I'm on a lot of cold medication. I'm not quite, you know. Yeah. I love me the polar bears, obviously. Who doesn't love me the polar bears? And I want a demon, but who doesn't? What I really enjoyed about having finished this, of course, was the first Pullman book group that we did at work. Other Waterstones are doing like one for all three, or just doing one for the first one, but we're special, so we're doing one for all three. One each. One for each. And it was really fantastic to sit in a room with some people who had read this book and just talk about it. There were people who've read it hundreds of times, people who've read it a few times, people who've never read it before. So it was a really interesting discussion, and I learned a lot of things about the book that I hadn't necessarily picked up on. You know, it's only the second time I read it. And it was just a really interesting discussion, so I'm really looking forward to the second His Dark Materials book group, which will of course be for The Subtle Knife, and that is on the 21st of September, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. So the next book that I read is another book group one, and this was for the regular Waterstones book group that we do in Exeter, which is normally run by the lovely Tracy, but as she was away on holiday, I volunteered to step into the breach, and the book that we were reading was All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, which of course won the Pulitzer Prize in 2015, and is one that people have always told me to read. Now, what do I say about this book? The book group discussion that we had was really fantastic. We had 21 people in the book group, which was quite scary for me because I've never led a book group before, and I was expecting maybe like 8 or 10 people, and people just kept on turning up, and I was just sat there like, oh, good! But it went really well, and everyone was lovely, and the discussion, the book group discussion of this book, I came out of the book group discussion feeling a bit more positive about the book than I had on the way out, put it that way. Like, I liked it, but I didn't love it, I think, is my main thing. You know, there are two characters in here who, well, they're not the only two characters, there are a lot of characters in here, but you follow these two main threads in Mary-Laure and Verna, and I just felt that there was a more interesting story in Verna, and that the book kept on going back to Mary-Laure too much, but I guess that's part of the point of it. So I won't get into a whole huge long review of this one, but liked it, didn't love it, would definitely read a book that was just Verna and his story and his sister Jutta. I would definitely read more of that story. Diamond stuff, I was just like, boring. And Mary-Laure I didn't warm to that much, but she did serve a purpose. So yeah, liked it, didn't love it, liked it a lot more after the book group discussion, which was nice. Then, right, you ready for this? Then I read a book that I absolutely loved. Okay. Ready? Pax. I was trying to say that a lot more high-pitched than I actually can, because I can't breathe. So Pax is the story of Peter, who's a young boy who finds a tiny abandoned baby fox kit. He is the only one surviving. There's a couple of other little fox kids who've died. So it's this little orphan fox, and he brings him up, and he's his best friend. He's called Pax. And then as the boy gets older, the book opens with the boy and Pax in the car. And the boy is very upset, and Pax is trying to work out why. And essentially, the war has meant that Peter's father is going off to fight in the war, so Peter's having to go and stay with his grandfather. And his dad has said to Peter, look, your grandfather's too old, we can't have the fox getting under his feet, you're gonna have to let the fox go. So, they're on the way to Peter's grandfather's house, and en route, they are letting go of Pax. And I'm going to start off with the one thing that I didn't necessarily love about it, and that is that it's quite Americanized. It's, you know, it's set in America, and they play baseball at school, and some of the references are a little bit more Americanized, but that's it. That's it. I love this book. Other than that, Pax himself, I am in love with Pax. The chapters written from Pax's perspective, from the perspective of a little fox who has only known Peter, who has only known human company his whole life, but is still essentially a wild animal, but has had that tamed out of him, who meets new foxes, who discovers something. The chapters from his perspective, they were better than the chapters from Peter's perspective. I'm not gonna lie. Like the Peter chapters, they were good. The book as a whole is good, but where this book really shone is in making you fall in love with Pax. Not even letting you fall in love with Pax, because he's so bloody cute and amazing. And the pictures, John Classen's illustrations. Right, I'm gonna have to adjust focus for this so that you guys can see this. So this is the first illustration that we see of Pax in the book. Isn't he adorable? Like, and every illustration's like that. I'm not gonna go through the whole book because this thing doesn't autofocus and that would take time. Before I get, you know, too foxy and too just excited about Pax. As a whole, this book as well is really fantastic about when it deals with sort of growing up, finding out who you are, loyalty, family, the bonds of that. So Peter, he's struggling to figure out who he is. His mother died when he was younger, as often happens in these kind of books. And his relationship with his father is slightly difficult, and then his father's relationship with his father is slightly different. So, and then essentially Peter and Pax both set out to try and find each other, is the main thrust of the plot. So they set out to find each other, and Peter meets a woman called Vola. That's her name. He meets a woman called Vola in the woods, who helps him when he injures himself. None of this is like massive spoiler alerts. So he meets Vola, and Vola helps him, and he learns a lot about who he is and helps her as well. And it's just utterly fantastic. If you've ever read Goodnight Mr. Tom or any Michael Morpurgo, it's very much got that vibe to it. It's heartwarming. It's, you know, there are parts in it that are like a bit mild peril kind of thing for kids, but it's all about sort of learning who you are, learning about the world, the harsh realities of the world, whether you're an animal or a human. And it's just utterly, utterly wonderful. So it's written by Sara Pennypacker and illustrated by John Classen, and it is absolutely wonderful, and I urge you to go and get it and read it. It is tough breathing. Next up, I read a book that everyone's been talking about, and I was quite excited about, and I was really grateful when I got a copy sent to me by Portobello Books. But I have to confess I was a bit disappointed in, and that is Such More Hands by Andres Barba. Now, I don't know whether it's because I don't read much spooky sort of horror fiction, or whether I just really don't like children in books in the main, you know, exceptions like Pax and other books, but there's something about this, and I don't know whether it was maybe when I was reading it as well, I possibly wasn't quite in the right headspace for reading it. I'd sort of finished Pax and All the Light We Cannot See like a while before and hadn't had time to read anything else. And just thought, right, I fancy something small that everyone's been talking about, so it's probably going to be quite good. And yeah, so it's essentially about a young girl called Maria whose parents die in a car accident and she gets sent to an orphanage. And I think to say anything more would spoil it, because I think maybe it's just not my cup of tea. Funnily enough, I got more from it from the afterword by Edmund White that talks about the writing of the novel and sort of a true event that it's allegedly based on. It sort of draws inspiration from an event that apparently happened in Brazil in the 60s or something, in an orphanage. And yeah, he sort of plays with it. And the writing itself, I mean, it's a translation by Lisa Dillman, and you know how much I love my translations by Lisa Dillman. I work with Yuri Herrera, I absolutely love, but there was something about it that it just felt quite oversaturated and a bit overplayed for me, and a bit much. Like, a lot of the horror and the creepiness and the unsettlingness for me was lost by the sheer amount of kind of, oh, I don't know, description's not the right, I don't know. There was something about this book that left me a bit cold, ironically, for a book that was sort of meant to be quite chilling. It just left me a bit cold, and I think maybe if I read it again, it would, I think possibly a lot of it was to do with when I was reading it and how I was reading it, but there was just something in it that it wasn't for me. It wasn't quite my cup of tea, despite how much I normally like the weirdy type fiction. The ghosty children bit just always leaves me a bit like, kids are creepy enough as it is, can we not just leave them well enough alone, kind of thing. So yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this one, and I think, you know, as I say, the writing in there is beautiful, just for me it was a bit much. It was just a bit sort of, for such a small book, there was just a lot of kind of, just felt very heavy and too, I don't know, wasn't for me. Maybe I will be a little bit more coherent about this book at some point in the future. I don't know, try and have a conversation with me about it on Twitter or something, or in the comments, and we'll see what happens. So next I read a book I've been meaning to read for a while, but didn't actually have a copy of, but then I was browsing a secondhand bookshop, and they had a copy of the gorgeous hardback, so I thought, well, why not? It was actually on the day that the paperback came out, and I was going to be heading up to work anyway, but I wasn't sure if we'd have the paperback in yet, and I saw this and I was like, well, that seems like fate to me. So Midwinter by Fiona Melrose is a book about a father and a son who are farmers in Suffolk, and at the beginning of the novel, the son, Vale, goes out for drinks with his friend Tom, and they're involved in a boating incident, and again, I don't really want to spoil much of it, but then it explores Vale and his father Landon's sort of history, what happened to Vale's mother, and their sort of past, their farming history, their history as father and son, and it's just, I loved this book. It was like I don't know, a juggernaut of some kind, but a peaceful juggernaut somehow. A brutal, peaceful, gentle, rolling juggernaut somehow. Essentially, it's a lot to do with communication and the lack of communication. And what's amazing about this book is that, you know, you as the outsider, as the reader, you have all the information, and you're just kind of screaming internally at the two characters just bloody well talk to each other. Well, all of the characters, actually, not just two of them. But it taps into that thing that I think we all do, where we don't say things for fear of hurting people, or we hold back for fear of hurting people, or sometimes we do the exact opposite. We don't hold back because we want to hurt people, and it deals with it all in such a human way. The sort of brokenness and the hardness that comes with not being able to communicate what you want to say, and repressed things that you've forgotten about either willfully or otherwise, and things that you just haven't dealt with as a family, as a unit, how that can come back to haunt you. It's a lot about fathers and sons as well. I seem to be reading a fair few books that are about fathers and sons recently, but very much about fathers and sons, not just Vale and Landon, but Tom and his father, and the relationship with nature as well. They're farmers, they live from the land, and that's a lot to do with a lot of their problems, why they had to move and come back again. It just had me gripped the whole way through in a painful kind of way. You're sort of turning the pages, willing people to talk to each other and sort things out and sort themselves out, but knowing that that's not how life always works, and it's not as simple as that, and you know what you've got to do, but actually being able to do it and figuring out how to do what you... It's so beautiful, painfully human, kept me gripped right till the very end, and then some. Utterly beautiful. So this one was on the Bailey's long list this last year. The most recent Bailey's long list, it was on it. And having now read it, I'm a bit peeved off that it didn't get on the shortlist, to be honest. Basically, it's a really bloody good book, and you should bloody well go and read it. Then I read, or should say, I've been reading alongside since I got it the other week, which I haven't hauled, but sod it. And that is Baking with Kafka by Tom Gauld. Now this is a collection of comics by Tom Gauld. He's had a previous one which is called You're All Just Jealous of My Jetpack, which I am waiting on my copy of because I have to have that too. They're a collection of comics. I think some of them have appeared in things like The New Scientist and other publications, but they're all in here. And what I love about this collection in particular, and I don't know if it's the same for You're All Just Jealous of My Jetpack, but the literary slant. I mean, Baking with Kafka, it's right there. It's baked in. I'm too tired to even get excited about that. The enduring love for books that goes through this is just utterly joyous and heartwarming, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading all of these comics. You know, I basically sort of sat there for an hour and more or less read the whole thing and then had to fall asleep. But there's just absolutely... They're hilarious, they're sweet, they're funny, they're loving, they're kind, they're just... Tom Gauld... I don't really know how to describe Tom Gauld's illustrations other than just go and bloody read some. Like, he posts some on his Instagram, so you can get a taste of it, and just... I love this guy's illustrations. As I said, when I read Moon Cop, and I've since got Goliath, probably my favourite illustrator and comic book. Well, not comic book, comic artist. I don't know many of them, but I just think he's the best that's working at the minute. High praise indeed from someone who knows not a jot what they're talking about. Would make a perfect gift, quite frankly, for anybody you know that loves books and loves reading. They'll just leaf through this and have an absolute chuckle at almost every single one of them. Then one I read since my last video, which I'm not going to actually properly talk about in this video, but I am just going to mention, is Kevin Barry's Beatlebone. So my last video was my 5-star predictions video, TBR pile thingy, and I decided I would read this one next, as it was the last of the Goldsmiths Prize winners that I had yet to read. So I read this one. I'm not going to talk about it in this video. I'm going to put it back on the stack of the 5-star prediction TBR pile to talk about when I do that one, but purely for my own continuity, and because I will go mad if I don't put it in here, I have also read this one this month. And then this afternoon I sat down and finished a book that I started last night and ended up staying up. I started reading it about 11:30 and ended up staying up until about 1:30, just utterly engrossed in it, and that is This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay. Now this is the proof edition that I got sent a little while ago, which I couldn't find for ages. I came upstairs and I was like, right, I'm going to read This Is Going to Hurt. This is what I'm going to read tonight, and I was just faffing around in here for like 5 minutes trying to find it and freaking out, but I found it. So This Is Going to Hurt is the secret diaries of a junior doctor. Adam Kay trained to be a doctor in 2006? Sorry, 2004. Adam Kay started work as a junior doctor, and this is the diaries of his time as a junior doctor. Now, he's quite open about the fact that since these diaries were written, basically he worked as a doctor for a while and then left the NHS, and then he was clearing out his stuff and found all these diary entries around the same time junior doctors were kind of being attacked for... Yeah, let's not go into this. Well, we will a bit, but not... But essentially, he found all his diaries and he thought, right, I'm going to use my voice and publish these diaries. And it is absolutely wonderful. If wonderful is the right word, it is eye-opening. It will make you laugh, cry, howl with anger, with rage, with joy. It's pretty gross in places as well, which is brilliant. It's just utterly, utterly vital, I think. The NHS has helped me out a few times in my life. And some of my family. The NHS is not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But the reason it's not perfect is not because of the doctors. It's not because of these... It's not actually because of the guys that actually treat you. The nurses, the doctors, the people who actually work in the NHS, the hospitals. That's not the reason that it's not perfect. They're the reason that it's as close to perfect as it is. They're the only reason that it functions at all. And they run on air? I don't know. They certainly don't run on enough money, or gratitude, or food, or time, or sleep, and... yeah. It's depressing because you see, well, if this is what doctors were up against in between 2004 and 2010, if this is what doctors were up against then, and then you think of what's been happening recently, yeah. It's not going to take you 3 days. It took me, what, 4 hours? Alright, I was glued to it, but it's diary entries, and it's funny, and it's informative, and it's not something that you will struggle to read. You will gobble it up. It's hard to read in terms of, holy... These guys do so much on so little. Read Adam Kay's book. Read it the right way round for better immersion, and appreciate your bloody doctors. Remember, they are human. Even if they are pretty superhuman. So, that is what I have read so far in the month of September. Don't know why it came out like that. Or that, what the hell? So I was going to have a little bit of a chat about the Man Booker Shortlist as well. which was announced yesterday. Shortlist was announced yesterday as I'm recording this, but this video is probably not going to go up on the Thursday, so never mind. What can I say? Well, the main thing I want to say is that was a surprise. A bit of a surprising shortlist, so let me just run through the shortlist for those of you who aren't sure. So, for those of you who have somehow missed it, the shortlist comprises Paul Auster's 4321, Emily Fridlund's History of Wolves, Mohsin Hamid's Exit West, Fiona Mosley's Elmet, George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo, and Ali Smith's Autumn. Now, of those ones, I have read 2 and loved 2. So, Lincoln in the Bardo is one of my books of the year so far, as is Autumn, sort of. So those 2 I have read and loved. The others I have got. And quite frankly, the 6th one I'm not bothered about. Now, my main thing about the shortlist is I'm disappointed in a few omissions. I think Solar Bones should have been on the shortlist. But having said that, like I said in my review for Solar Bones, I think it has won the award that it was most suited for in the Goldsmiths Prize. But then at the same time, well, sod's suited. It's a brilliant book. Basically, I'm pretty convinced that 4321 is only on the shortlist because the judges still haven't finished reading it from when it was announced on the long list. I don't really want to read an 900 page book with tiny writing, written by a white middle class dude, about a white dude, and his life 4 times. 4 different versions of a white dude's life. There are much more interesting stories to be told, to be read, that I'm just not bothered at all. Me, if I'm going to read any Paul Auster, I'll read the New York trilogy. But from what I've heard of 4321, meh. So, I shan't be bothering with 4321. If it wins, no, still not going to read it. Essentially, my point is that I am going to read the rest of the shortlist, apart from 4321. Also, the fact that even if I started reading it now, I probably wouldn't finish it in time for the winning announcement, so I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Oh yeah, Livy, just replace the battery and start jabbering at the camera without pressing record. That's really bloody clever, isn't it? So the next book that I am going to read is The History of Wolves by Emily Fridlund. That's going to be the next of my Man Booker Shortlist reads. Now, I'm probably not going to finish this one before I have to start reading The Subtle Knife by Pullman. I've got to read this one by Thursday the 21st, so it's the coming Thursday, because we've got the second Philip Pullman book group going on at work. This one is going to be even newer to me, again, than Northern Lights. Like, I could remember the first bit of Northern Lights and then just nothing. This one, even further from my memory. So this will be fun. So, those are the next 2 books I'm going to read. Yeah, that's that for today. I need to be able to breathe. So that's what I've read so far in September. As usual, have a little chat with me in the comments below. Any of these that you've read that you want to have a little chat about, have a talk with me. If you haven't read them and you've been tempted, you want to know a bit more of my thoughts than I've said in here in a more coherent way, you know, especially with such small hands, maybe I'll actually be able to formulate some words about that. Who knows? Then have a little chat with me in the comments below, as usual. Man Booker Shortlist. Have a little chat with me about that as well. Are you surprised, shocked, upset, maddened, couldn't care less? Have a little chat with me. I should clarify, I'm not really like that bothered, but I just, you know, you work in the book industry, you end up paying attention to the prizes. Thanks very much for watching. I will hopefully be less ill next time and will be able to breathe and get more excited and actually feel a bit more like myself in my next video. But until then, happy reading and you'll see me next time.